On May 15, 2022, police in Gwangju, South Korea received an unusual missing person report. What made it strange was that the person filing the report wasn't a direct family member, but rather the brother-in-law of the victim. According to his account, his wife's older sister, 43-year-old Park Eun-hee, had mysteriously disappeared. 3 days earlier, Kim Jong-bin, Eun-hee's boyfriend, had delivered shocking news. Eun-hee had taken 4 billion won, approximately $3 million of his money, and vanished without a trace. During this time, the youngest sister in the family had continuously tried to contact their older sister by phone, but the calls went unanswered. Fortunately, they later received a text message from their older sister. She said she no longer had feelings for Jong-bin, had decided to start a new life, and would never return. While this seemed normal to his wife, the brother-in-law filing the report found many things suspicious. For instance, Jong-bin initially claimed that their older sister had taken 4 billion won in cash from his house and disappeared. What made him suspicious was Jong-bin's emphasis that it was cash, not checks or wire transfers, which seemed highly unrealistic. With such an enormous amount of cash, it would be nearly impossible for a woman to carry it away undetected. When the brother-in-law expressed his suspicions, Jong-bin immediately changed his story, explaining that he had misremembered. It was actually only 800 million won, approximately $600,000, in cash. However, this revised answer only made the brother-in-law more skeptical. The difference between 4 billion and 800 million won was too large to be a simple mistake. The second thing that made the brother-in-law suspicious was Jong-bin's attitude about reporting to the police. Immediately after their older sister went missing, he had suggested reporting to the authorities, but Jong-bin prevented him. He explained that he still loved Eun-hee, and involving the police would put her at risk of prosecution and imprisonment, which he didn't want to happen. Jong-bin also expressed hope that their older sister would return so they could continue their life together. Although this reason seemed reasonable, the brother-in-law still insisted they should report to the police. However, Kim Jong-bin made a strange request. They could file a report, but absolutely must not mention him during the police investigation. He justified this by saying that since he and their older sister weren't legally married and were just lovers, there was no need to mention him. However, this was completely illogical to the brother-in-law. Kim Jong-bin was the person most directly related to their older sister's disappearance and also suffered the largest financial loss. How could they hide his role from the police? These mounting suspicions finally forced him to go to the police station to report the entire incident. In his statement to police, the brother-in-law revealed another important detail. He wasn't the first person notified about their older sister's disappearance. The first to know were his wife and Park Eun-hee's youngest sister. Notably, both women had very positive feelings toward Kim Jong-bin, praising both his character and personality. Even when they heard that their older sister had stolen money and fled, their first reaction wasn't anger at Jong-bin but shame and a desire to apologize to him on behalf of their sister. Based on the detailed statement from the reporting party, police grasped the general situation. They recognized that Jong-bin had many suspicious aspects in this case, but with limited evidence available, conducting an investigation too hastily might make the suspect cautious. This would not only complicate the investigation, but also potentially threaten the safety of those involved. Based on this analysis, police decided to change their investigation strategy. Instead of directly approaching Kim Jong-bin, they chose to gather clues from family members who understood the situation. This method would help collect more information while cross-checking the reliability of what the reporting party had presented. Accordingly, police immediately summoned Eun-hee's two sisters for questioning. When she entered the police station, the youngest sister still clearly showed sadness about the relationship between her older sister and Jong-bin becoming strained and ultimately falling apart. According to initial information, she was the family member who had the most regular contact and interaction with Jong-bin, so only she knew many important details. The youngest sister recounted that their older sister Park Eun-hee had gone through a difficult period in her life. After divorcing at age 30, their older sister suffered from severe depression. 8 years ago, on an ordinary day, She had left home without any prior notice to anyone. From then on, the family completely lost contact with her. No one could call or meet her directly. Only occasionally did they receive brief text messages from her as a sign that she was still alive somewhere in the world. The turning point came in November 2021 when their mother passed away. Somehow, Eun-hee learned of this sad news and suddenly appeared at their mother's funeral. However, when they met again after many years of separation, the entire family felt shocked and estranged by her transformation. In everyone's memory, Eun-hee, as the eldest daughter of the family, had always been the epitome of propriety. But this time when she returned, she was completely different. Her body was covered in tattoos. Her face showed many signs of cosmetic surgery. This transformation was so dramatic that the family could hardly recognize her as their relative. What surprised the family even more was that Eun-hee didn't return alone but brought along a strange man, Jong-bin. He also had tattoos covering his body, with an appearance that seemed somewhat unapproachable and intimidating. When they inquired, the family learned that Kim Jong-bin's profession was tattooing. The youngest sister immediately concluded that the sudden changes in their older sister's appearance were likely due to this man's influence. However, Jong-bin demonstrated that he was financially well off. He arrived in a luxurious imported car worth up to 100 million won, approximately $75,000. According to what he shared, his family was quite wealthy, and at over 40 years old, he had inherited a substantial fortune from his family. Initially, with her first impression of the tattoos scattered across his body, the youngest sister had preconceptions that Jong-bin would be difficult and unapproachable. However, after some time interacting with him, she completely changed her mind. Jong-bin proved to be an extremely polite, kind man with an elegant demeanor. From his very first visit to their home, he demonstrated remarkable thoughtfulness. As a potential son-in-law, Jong-bin brought valuable gifts specifically chosen for each family member. Moreover, he was very friendly when communicating with everyone, always trying to comfort and encourage the family to overcome their grief. Jong-bin's thoughtfulness wasn't just expressed through words but also through concrete actions. To help the entire family overcome their grief, he proactively organized a trip for everyone and personally paid all expenses. The trip not only helped the family temporarily forget their sorrow, but also created opportunities for everyone to better understand Jong-bin. After the trip ended, Kim Jong-bin continued to show deep concern for the family by proposing a long-term solution. He sat down to discuss with the two sisters about their father's situation. Jong-bin analyzed thoroughly. Their father was now elderly, and after his wife's death, had to live alone, which would certainly make him feel lonely and sad. Meanwhile, the second sister had her own family to care for, and the youngest sister, though unmarried, was also busy with work. Recognizing this situation, Kim Jong-bin made a heartfelt proposal. He would personally fund moving their father into the highest quality nursing home in the area. He explained that at the nursing home, their father would not only receive excellent care, but also have opportunities to socialize with people of similar age. This would help him alleviate loneliness and gradually heal the wounds in his heart after losing his life partner. Hearing Jong-bin present this thoughtful plan, the two sisters were deeply moved. They couldn't believe that a man who had recently entered the family could think so far ahead and care for them so deeply. These warm actions brought the family a special sense of comfort. Although they had just lost their mother, the spiritual pillar of the family, Jong-bin's appearance seemed to bring new strength. From their first meeting until this point, all his gestures and actions demonstrated sincerity and responsibility. This convinced both the youngest sister and the second sister, making them fully accept Jong-bin as a son-in-law of the family. Even their father, who was usually picky and selective, didn't spare his praise, calling Jong-bin the family's guardian angel. To better understand this relationship, the two sisters also listened to Eun-hee tell the story of her love with Jong-bin. According to their older sister, everything began in 2019, when she was still struggling with severe depression after her painful divorce. During the darkest period of her life, Eun-hee happened to meet Jong-bin at a golf course. Like the initial reaction of other family members, Eun-hee's first impression of Jong-bin wasn't very positive either. His tattoo-covered appearance and somewhat rebellious style made her feel he was an untrustworthy man. However, when the two had opportunities to interact and get to know each other better, Eun-hee was gradually won over by Jung-bin's elegant style and refined behavior. This attraction grew stronger day by day, and before long the two officially became a couple. Just as the family had witnessed, Jung-bin was indeed an extremely meticulous and thoughtful man. He always cared deeply about the emotions and moods of those around him, while having a special talent for creating romantic moments and sweet surprises at any time. Jung-bin's timely appearance acted like healing medicine, helping Eun-hee quickly overcome the pain from her previous broken marriage. This love was truly beautiful and perfect, making anyone who saw it admire them. But life isn't always like a dream. Everything began to change unexpectedly on May 12, 2021. That day, the youngest sister suddenly received a phone call from Jung-bin, and the content of the call completely shocked her. Over the phone, Jung-bin displayed a completely different attitude. His tone was aggressive and angry, to the point that made the youngest sister feel like he was a stranger. He shouted with a voice full of resentment, "Your older sister has betrayed me. She not only cheated but also took 4 billion won of my money and fled. I loved her with all my heart, never expecting to receive such a painful result." Hearing this shocking news, the youngest sister was completely confused and didn't know how to react. She hurriedly contacted her second sister and brother-in-law to inform them about this shocking event happening in their family. The important thing was that since Eun-hee had a history of leaving home before, the two sisters had no reason to doubt the authenticity of Kim Jung-bin's account. The two sisters' first reaction wasn't anger at their older sister, but rather feeling extremely sorry for Jung-bin and ashamed of their sister's betrayal. The youngest sister and the second sister's family decided to immediately go to Jung-bin's house to comfort him, hoping to somewhat ease the pain tormenting his soul. When they arrived, the scene before them made the three of them even more heartbroken. Jung-bin sat alone in the large house, his entire being radiating sadness and despair, as if all life had been drained from him. This was no longer the image of the confident, elegant man they once knew. However, as soon as he saw them enter, Jung-bin suddenly exploded with emotion. He completely lost control and began screaming violently. This scene was so terrifying that both the youngest sister and second sister cried out in fear. Faced with Jung-bin's terrifying anger, the second sister made an unexpected move. She pulled the youngest sister to kneel down right there in front of Jung-bin. On behalf of their older sister who had committed this sin, the two sisters earnestly apologized and begged for his forgiveness. Witnessing the scene of the two sisters kneeling and pleading, Jung-bin gradually regained his composure. His rage slowly subsided, replaced by tears of pain. He bowed his head and cried bitterly, beginning to confide in the two sisters about the deep love he had for Park Eun-hee. The words Kim Jung-bin shared moved the two sisters even more. He declared that if Park Eun-hee was willing to return, he would do everything according to her wishes, with no conditions. Even if she decided not to come back, Kim Jung-bin was still willing to provide her with 30 million won, approximately $22,500, monthly to ensure her livelihood. He only hoped for one thing, that Park Eun-hee, wherever she was, wouldn't have to suffer hardship due to financial shortages. These words hit the two sisters like lightning. They couldn't believe that such a noble-hearted man existed in this world. This amazement quickly turned into anger. They felt even more furious about their older sister's irresponsible and selfish behavior. Hoping to persuade Park Eun-hee to change her decision, the two sisters decided to call her right in front of Jung-bin. However, like previous times, the call went unanswered, with only the ringtone echoing in tense silence. Fortunately, not long after, they received a response text from Park Eun-hee. She simply said she was busy. The two sisters hurriedly sent back long messages, describing in detail Jung-bin's desperate and painful condition, begging her to return to save this relationship. However, Eun-hee's next response was like cold water thrown in their faces. The tone in the message was extremely cold and decisive. She had started a new chapter in her life and absolutely had no intention of returning. To prove her words, Eun-hee also sent a recently taken photo showing she was in a completely unfamiliar place. Jung-bin stood nearby, witnessing the cold response from the person he loved, and was pushed into complete despair. The soul pain was so great, he couldn't bear it. In a moment of losing control, Kim Jong-bin rushed toward the window intending to end his life. Fortunately, the second sister's husband reacted in time. He quickly grabbed Jung-bin and pulled him back to safety. After the situation was controlled, the brother-in-law began raising the points that had made him suspicious from the beginning. He asked Jung-bin directly, "Why is there so much cash in the house? And how could Sister Eun-hee, a woman, carry such a large amount of money without anyone noticing?" This unexpected question caused Jung-bin to react very strangely. He visibly startled, then hurriedly changed his statement. Kim Jong-bin explained that he had misremembered. The actual amount was only 800 million won, not 4 billion as he had said before. He also added that this was loan money he had just arranged for an investment project. After hearing this, the two sisters hurriedly asked police to quickly help search for Eun-hee. They affirmed that even though the relationship between the two had fallen apart, they couldn't let Jung-bin, who had been so good to their family, suffer such an enormous financial loss. They hoped everything could be resolved amicably. After completing their statements, the two sisters left the police station together. However, something unexpected happened while police were organizing and compiling the documents. The youngest sister suddenly returned to the police station alone. She explained to police that there was sensitive information she couldn't share in the presence of her second sister. However, she felt this information might be very important for the investigation, and police needed to know about it. The youngest sister began telling a strange story related to spiritualism. On December 1st, 2021, while the entire family was still grieving their mother's death, Jung-bin had introduced her to a shaman. What made the youngest sister begin trusting this master's abilities were the amazingly accurate information he provided. The shaman could describe in detail the specific situation in her family, from small daily matters to major events they had recently experienced. This deep understanding made her completely believe that the person on the other end of the line truly possessed supernatural abilities. From then on, the relationship between the youngest sister and the shaman became regular and close. Throughout the following months, whenever she encountered difficulties or unexpected situations in life, she would turn to him for advice. What was surprising was that the shaman's guidance always brought positive results. Many complex problems in work and personal life were resolved smoothly thanks to his guidance. These consecutive successes further strengthened the youngest sister's faith, making her increasingly dependent on this mysterious master's advice. However, the important turning point occurred in March 2022. The shaman began issuing concerning warnings about Jung-bin. He warned that Jung-bin, who had brought much luck and happiness to the family, was now being targeted by evil forces. More seriously, the shaman claimed that among all family members, only the youngest sister, as an unmarried woman who had never been married, had enough spiritual power to help Jung-bin escape the pursuit of these evil spirits. Faced with this serious warning, the youngest sister felt extremely worried. She couldn't accept letting the happy life their family had just regained dissolve into nothing. Therefore, she decided to completely trust and follow all the shaman's instructions to protect Jung-bin from evil forces. According to the shaman, to break the bad luck and drive away evil spirits, the youngest sister needed to perform some special rituals. First, she had to maintain regular intimate contact with Jung-bin. Moreover, for the next 2 years, she had to commit to absolute loyalty. She couldn't have romantic or intimate relationships with any other man besides Jung-bin. These requirements became even more bizarre when he gave specific rituals. Starting from March 29th, the youngest sister had to get tattoos on her body. More notably, she also had to perform a strange ritual, burning her unwashed underwear at Jung-bin's house. Although she felt these requirements were somewhat unusual, the youngest sister still carried them out devotedly. She not only followed all instructions, but also recorded the entire process on video to send to the shaman as a way to prove her strict compliance. However, what truly terrified the youngest sister wasn't the bizarre rituals, but the shaman's horrifying prophetic abilities. Before Park Eun-hee disappeared, he had made very specific warnings about their older sister. The shaman claimed that Park Eun-hee had inherent greed in her bones, and this would become the source of a great disaster for the entire family. He predicted that their older sister would cause serious financial loss to Jung-bin. The scary thing was that just a few days after the shaman made this prophecy, everything happened exactly as he had said. The youngest sister concluded her statement with fear that all the events occurring might be due to evil forces harassing their family. She advised police to seriously consider this possibility during their investigation. However, for experienced police officers, the youngest sister's account provided a completely different perspective. They felt extremely surprised that an adult could be deceived by such crude, superstitious tricks. In the investigators' eyes, this was clearly not a supernatural phenomenon, but a carefully calculated scam. Particularly, the requirement for the youngest sister to burn personal underwear without providing any reasonable explanation made police immediately recognize this as a psychological test. The purpose of this action was to check the victim's level of obedience and willingness to follow commands, thereby assessing the ability to completely control this person. Police applied a basic investigation principle. In any fraud case, you must find who ultimately benefits, as that person is the real mastermind. When carefully analyzing the shaman's requirements, they discovered an important suspicious point. The requirement for the youngest sister to get tattoos on her body completely matched Jung-bin's personal preferences that she had described. This couldn't just be a random coincidence. From this clue, police began suspecting that this mysterious shaman was very likely Kim Jong-bin himself, or at least his accomplice. Based on this hypothesis, police recognized that before Eun-hee disappeared, the shaman had made very specific prophecies about their older sister causing financial disaster. So there was only one logical explanation. These prophecies were actually just part of a plan that Jong-bin or his accomplice had devised beforehand. Accurate prediction could only happen when the person making the prediction was the one who would carry out the action. From this reasoning, an important question arose. If everything was just a prepared plan, where was Park Eun-hee now? With extensive experience in solving cases, the police team quickly realized they were facing a serious case, very likely a premeditated crime. Recognizing the dangerous nature of the incident, police decided to act immediately. They asked the youngest sister to lead the way to Jung-bin's house to invite him to the station for investigation cooperation. When the group arrived at Jung-bin's address, they caught him just as he had driven home and was parking his car. However, what happened next was completely beyond everyone's expectations. As soon as he saw the police car and uniformed officers, Jung-bin had an extremely unusual reaction. He appeared so panicked that he didn't even have time to finish closing his car door. Instead, Jung-bin immediately ran away. Witnessing this suspicious fleeing behavior, the police officers present at the scene didn't hesitate to immediately pursue Kim Jong-bin. Meanwhile, the youngest sister also realized the situation was becoming very unusual. She hurriedly took out her phone to urgently contact her second sister, informing her about the unexpected situation occurring. Right after that, with extreme worry, she continued calling Park Eun-hee directly to confirm their older sister's safety. However, when the youngest sister made the call to Park Eun-hee, the phone ringtone didn't come from some distant place, but rang right from inside the car that Jung-bin had just abandoned. This discovery was like a lightning bolt of awakening, making everyone begin to realize that the story they had been told might not be the truth at all. Soon, the fleeing Jung-bin was successfully caught by police and brought to the station. Only then did police discover that even Jung-bin's name was fake. His real name was Kim Su-hee. This discovery shocked Eun-hee's entire family. They realized that the man they had trusted and loved like family was actually a professional con artist. Police began interrogating Su-hee about Eun-hee's whereabouts, especially the most important question, whether she was still alive. However, Su-hee proved extremely stubborn and uncooperative. He stubbornly maintained absolute silence, refusing to answer any police questions. This attitude only increased suspicions about what he had done to Eun-hee. Fortunately, Eun-hee's phone found in Su-hee's car became a valuable source of information. What was surprising was that Su-hee seemed to have been careless in handling evidence. Perhaps due to negligence or overconfidence, he hadn't deleted any data from this phone. When police examined the phone's contents, they discovered that Eun-hee had maintained very frequent text exchanges with the shaman that Su-hee had introduced to the youngest sister. The number of messages between Eun-hee and the shaman reached over 1,200 texts, an enormous number showing the depth of interaction between the two. This exchange lasted a very long time, starting from August 2020 and continuing until May 11, 2022, just days before Park Eun-hee was said to have disappeared. When analyzing the content of messages from the early period, police noticed the communication pattern was very similar to what the youngest sister had described before. The shaman began by demonstrating deep understanding of Eun-hee's actual circumstances, then gradually building trust through psychological advice and spiritual guidance. Continuing deeper analysis of the message content, police discovered a very sophisticated psychological control pattern. After establishing trust, the shaman began using excuses about bad omens and misfortune to deeply interfere in Eun-hee's personal life. An amazing truth was revealed through these messages. All the changes in Eun-hee's appearance that the family had once attributed to Su-hee's influence actually originated from this mysterious shaman's advice. The tattoos, cosmetic surgeries, and even her way of dressing, everything was directed by the shaman in detail. Even more concerning, this shaman had interfered in Eun-hee's most private life. He gave specific guidance about the romantic and intimate relationship between her and Su-hee. All these instructions were wrapped in a noble reason. Everything is for your lover's happiness. This very phrase became the golden key for him to completely control Eun-hee. With her deep love for Su-hee, she was willing to do anything the shaman requested, no matter how strange those requests might be. From this evidence, police could definitively confirm this shaman was either Kim Su-hee himself or his close accomplice. Through this fake persona, Su-hee had successfully manipulated and controlled not only Park Eun-hee, but also her youngest sister. However, what truly worried police about Eun-hee's life were the most recent messages in the conversation. On May 9th, just 2 days before Eun-hee was said to have disappeared, the shaman had made a very suspicious request. He instructed Eun-hee to buy a large waterproof travel bag. For police officers experienced in investigating criminal cases, this type of bag is commonly used as a tool to conceal and transport bodies after committing crimes. Could Eun-hee no longer be alive, and were the messages the family received actually Kim Su-hee impersonating her? This question was gradually being answered as police prepared to use the evidence they had just gathered to force Su-hee to confess the truth. However, just then, another unexpected development occurred at the police station. A strange woman had come looking for Su-hee. What was odd was that when the two sisters sitting and waiting for interrogation results saw this woman, they both appeared extremely surprised. The youngest sister couldn't help but call out, "Older sister," but the woman didn't respond. Only then did they realize this woman wasn't their older sister. Let's call her Ms. Choi. Ms. Choi's purpose in coming to the police station was to pay 10 million won, approximately $7,500, bail to get Su-hee released from custody. However, police had to inform her that Kim Su-hee was currently a suspect in a serious case, possibly involving murder, so bail couldn't be applied. What made police curious was the question: why could the two sisters mistake Ms. Choi for their older sister Eun-hee? Could the similarity between these two women be just coincidence, or was there something deeper? The answer was revealed when Ms. Choi shared about herself. It turned out she also had tattoos covering her body, exactly like Eun-hee. Not only that, Ms. Choi had also undergone many cosmetic surgeries following advice from a self-proclaimed shaman, the same shaman who had appeared in Eun-hee's story. This strange similarity wasn't coincidence. Police realized that in Su-hee's mind there was an ideal woman template. Through the shaman character, he had required all his girlfriends to undergo cosmetic surgery to achieve an appearance similar to the template in his mind. Therefore, when looking at their external appearance, Ms. Choi and Eun-hee truly had amazing similarities, from face to figure, even their tattoo styles. This was precisely why the two sisters could mistake Ms. Choi for their older sister when they first saw her. Actually, the luxury car that Kim had used to display wealth was actually a rental, with monthly fees of 5 million won, approximately $3,750, paid by Ms. Choi herself. More importantly, Ms. Choi confirmed that the love story between her and Su-hee also always involved interference from that shaman. A few days before the incident occurred, this shaman had made a special request of Ms. Choi. He had asked her to take a phone and reply to messages according to content he directed and send selfies of herself. At that time, the shaman had explained to Ms. Choi that this was a noble mission to help save a love relationship being opposed and obstructed by both families. Ms. Choi, with her kind heart, didn't suspect anything and followed the request. No one could have imagined that the truth would be so cruel. The combination of Ms. Choi's detailed testimony and irrefutable evidence from the conversation records in the phone created a tight web of evidence. Under pressure from this evidence, Kim Su-hee finally couldn't continue resisting. He was forced to abandon his silent attitude and began confessing about the horrific crime he had committed. As the police and everyone had predicted, Eun-hee had indeed been murdered. Another shocking truth was also revealed. The miraculous prophetic shaman that everyone had trusted all this time was Kim Su-hee himself. He had created this fake persona to control and manipulate the victim's psychology. Based on Su-hee's confession, on May 18th, police conducted a search in the Samurai area of Gwangju district. They discovered an abandoned house in an isolated location. As soon as they pushed the door open and stepped inside, a heavy stench hit their noses, forcing everyone to cover their faces. The air inside was filled with the smell of decay and rot. In the corner of the house, police found some water bottles and camping equipment neatly arranged, as if someone had stayed there not long before. In the shoe cabinet at the entrance, they found several pairs of sneakers. However, what attracted the most attention was the large waterproof bag placed right in the center of the room. The terrible stench everyone perceived was emanating from inside this bag. With maximum caution, police slowly opened the zipper of the waterproof bag. The scene that appeared before them was truly horrific. A human body had curled up inside. Initial identification confirmed this was Park Eun-hee. The condition of the body showed that Eun-hee had been dead for quite some time. The decomposition process had progressed severely, making fingerprint collection and other forensic evidence gathering extremely difficult. After conducting an autopsy, forensic experts determined that Park Eun-hee had died from strangulation. So why did Kim Su-hee kill his girlfriend? According to his account, the journey to becoming a con artist began when he was young. Kim Su-hee happened to read about gaslighting, a psychological manipulation technique that makes victims doubt their own perception and memory. He was strongly attracted to the absolute control power this technique provided. After studying and practicing, Su-hee discovered he had a special talent for applying this method. In his first relationships, he had successfully manipulated and controlled his partners, thereby tasting the sweetness of power. These initial successes drove him to continue developing into a professional con artist. When Su-hee met Eun-hee, he was initially truly attracted by her beauty. Although over 40 years old, Eun-hee still possessed charming and elegant beauty. This made him decide to turn her into his special masterpiece. To win over Eun-hee, Su-hee created a completely fake identity. He claimed to be the heir to a huge fortune, with enough finances to support her in a luxurious lifestyle. With skillful acting and carefully prepared details, he successfully attracted Eun-hee and convinced her to live with him. 1 year after the two met, in August 2020, Su-hee proceeded to the next step in his plan. He introduced Eun-hee to the shaman, encouraging her to share all life problems with this master. After the shaman persona had gained Eun-hee's complete trust, Su-hee began the transformation phase according to his personal desires. Through spiritual advice, he gradually changed Eun-hee's appearance, personality, and even lifestyle to suit his own preferences. However, Eun-hee wasn't his only victim. Su-hee had simultaneously applied the same technique to many other women. The important difference was that with other girlfriends, his main purpose was money. He would use excuses about profitable investment projects to defraud their money, thereby maintaining a luxurious lifestyle and reinforcing his fake wealthy image. Precisely because Eun-hee completely trusted Su-hee's financial status, she always felt satisfied and secure in this relationship. But all this began to change when he attended her mother's funeral. Eun-hee's beauty was perhaps hereditary, so when he attended the funeral, he noticed her two sisters. They were both very beautiful. Unfortunately, the second sister was already married. Fortunately, the youngest sister was still single. She was younger, more beautiful, pure, and lovely. This made Su-hee unable to forget her. So he once again used his old method, using the shaman character as a tool, trying to win her over. However, Su-hee also understood clearly that Eun-hee was the barrier between them. The youngest sister couldn't betray her older sister to be with him. With a new target, looking at the face he had seen for 3 years no longer interested him. And Eun-hee seemed to also realize that her lover had designs on her youngest sister. Because of this, the two often argued. Finally, Su-hee decided to eliminate Eun-hee. So he used the shaman identity to ask Eun-hee to buy related tools. Then he lured her to an abandoned house for camping. At that time, he had given her a beer laced with sleeping pills. Not long after, she fell asleep. So he immediately took out the rope he had prepared and cruelly killed her. After completing everything, he locked the house door and hurriedly returned home to stage the story that followed. Police at that time also found 2 other tools in this house. They speculated this was perhaps because he prepared 2 additional tools in case the rope couldn't achieve its purpose. In police investigation, they discovered that besides Eun-hee and Ms. Choi, other women that Jung-bin defrauded all had one common characteristic: divorced, lonely, emotionally vulnerable. He targeted this psychological weakness, approaching them through impersonating a wealthy person. Then he introduced the shaman to psychologically manipulate them. Although the scam was simple, the process was very meticulous, completely beyond what a few short sentences could describe. In the end, Su-hee successfully defrauded a total of 367 million won, approximately $275,000 from them. Notably, he had previously had 9 criminal convictions, but the women who had been with him knew nothing about this. He disguised himself too well. In 2023, Kim Su-hee was sentenced by the court to 30 years in prison. He quickly appealed. The second trial was held at the Gwangju High Court in South Korea. The court stated that considering Su-hee had certain antisocial personality traits, potential for reoffending, combined with the brutal criminal methods and large amounts of money involved, they decided to modify the first trial verdict. The court sentenced Jung-bin to 35 years in prison and 15 years of electronic monitoring. This result was ultimately upheld by the South Korean Supreme Court. He is currently still serving his sentence in prison. And that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you in the next videos.